What's good, everybody? I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect, and welcome back to the channel. And we are back with another board as we get further and further into conference play. Now, there have been quite a bit of changes since the last one that we did, but it is still very fluid, and I have a decent amount of uncertainty beyond those first couple prospects. Not necessarily in them belonging or being valuable players, but more in how you weigh their flaws in reference to some of the others and all that good stuff. But we'll touch on the specifics of that several times throughout this video. But yeah, we've got a lot to get to, so be sure to leave a like and subscribe if you haven't already, and let's go ahead and get into it. Coming in at number one, once again, fresh off a 42-point game, Flagg has been great most of the year, but he's really started to show just how special he is. Over his last 6 games, he's putting up basically 25, 8, 6, 2, and 1 on over 60% true shooting, and he's now got his BPM over 14, which has historically guaranteed star impact outside of Michael Beasley. A 6'9" wing who has great feel on both ends and can hang athletically on top of everything else he brings. That's someone you can expect to be a franchise cornerstone. And answering the efficiency and shooting questions he had earlier in the season has made him someone that's harder to even entertain as anything other than the number 1 pick. Dylan Harper is at number 2, and at this point I think we've got a big enough sample that he'll be locked in here, at least for me anyways. His combination of elite driving, poised playmaking, and further emergence as a shot maker at 6'6" make him a pretty easy guy to like at the top of the class. Now, he's still got some questions in his pull-up, specifically in the mid-range, but he's been the best creator in the class with NBA size, and that keeps him here with some clear distance between him and anyone you'd argue for number 3. Hopefully he gets healthy from being sick. It's clear that that has affected him these last couple games that he's tried to play through, but that obviously wouldn't be wise to factor into his projection at all. Kasper's Yakuchonis is going to miss some time with a forearm injury, which is unfortunate, but before that he'd kind of become Mr. Consistent and really asserted himself as one of the best offensive players in the class. At about 6'5", he's a high field playmaker who can make shots from the perimeter and play really well within ball screens. Now, there are still some reasonable questions about his athleticism and how well he creates an advantage outside of the pick and roll, but he's the type of player I ultimately think figures it out more often than not, and to this point that's been the case, and I think he's worth valuing fairly high within this class. Baylor's VJ Edgecombe is a sort of tough guy to place on the board. He's an elite athlete, a very good defensive prospect with steal and block rates near 5, and he's also an interesting off-ball player and connected passer on offense, but he is like 6'4", he doesn't offer much as a creator, and the shot is still questionable, though he's made progress in the last month. I do think he's a clear NBA contributor, but conference play is ultimately going to dictate how much star upside is there and where you take him, and games like Cincinnati and Utah are at least a positive start for that. Ace Bailey is one of the best tough shot makers you're ever going to see at 18 years old, and that Indiana game was what it looks like when he gets hot and also has all the freedom. Now, in saying that, his decision making is still erratic, he doesn't create many advantages, and I think that puts a clear roof on his ceiling. But looking at him as a 6'9" play finisher with clear defensive upside, there's still appeal and a path to him being a positive contributor. And because nobody else has really emerged, he's still someone that's hard to argue against being in this range. We'll see if he drives and handles the ball more effectively like he did against the Hoosiers, but that's still how I view him rather than throwing out the T-Mac and KD names just because of highlights. Kamal Malawach has been one of the easier players to like in this class to me. He's been an overwhelming positive presence for Duke and has a projectable role as a rim protector and play finisher. He's gotten subtly better all year, and though he's not a huge part of this offense and doing anything besides being a lob threat, his value is still pretty obvious. For all that, he'll be in heavy consideration for teams looking for a potential anchor, probably starting as high as the top 5.
Some guys, they're 6'11", play 7 too. Yeah.
Trey Johnson has a projectable game as a scoring guard who excels off the ball, can knock down threes, and get his own shot from the perimeter. And even though he isn't great defensively or as a secondary playmaker type, those parts of his game are at least there enough. Now, he's still not much of a threat as a driver, and that could be limiting, but he has lottery potential, and I'm curious to see how he responds as these SEC teams do what they can to take him away as a scorer. Asa Newell has a winning combination of defensive versatility and activity and the athleticism to finish plays consistently as a 6'10 forward. In these games he's had recently, hitting threes and showing more flashes as a driver have been major positives. He's still got some questions about that offensive value and being a bit of a tweener, but the more he shoots, the more those go away, and overall he's consistently produced and should be well in lottery discussions. Alabama freshman LeBaron Philon has been terrific this season and a key piece on one of the better teams in the country. He's done a little of everything for them, scoring well at the rim, making plays in the pick and roll, cutting, getting offensive rebounds, and defending at the point of attack. He's kind of been their Swiss Army knife in a lot of ways. Now, there is still some debate on where you take someone like him, given he's been a below average shooter and not the clearest primary or point guard, and also not like an elite athlete, but he's a winning player, great decision maker, and should have a good chance of carving out a role, and I think that'll keep him a top 20 guy and maybe even a lottery pick in this class. OU freshman Jeremiah Fears has established himself as another one of the best creators this draft has. He's a dynamic ball handler and downhill threat that's also a capable shot maker and has solid size. Now, SEC play has been rough for him. He's going to have to keep growing as a decision maker and really settle in some of these games. It's been the first time you could really tell that he should be in high school right now, but if he can show more of who he's been the majority of the season, he'll be in the lottery mix or maybe even higher than that in the right team scenario. Liam McNeely is still a very good role player bet as a big shooter who can attack a closeout, limits mistakes, and is a good team defender. Now, he's out for a couple weeks with a high ankle sprain, but hopefully he returns soon because they need him, and what he was showing as a playmaker and driver in games like Gonzaga and Butler is the type of stuff that would make him a lottery lock and might even push him to that next tier of players. Duke's Kai Knippel has picked it up as of late, both from three and just overall producing offensively, and it's been much needed. Now, there's still questions in his athleticism and defense, and especially the higher you consider him, but I see a clear contributor as a shooting wing with good feel and a guy that can score off a closeout, so that'll likely keep him in that mid-first and lottery discussion, especially if he continues to light it up in conference play. Derek Queen has been one of the most fascinating prospects that's come around in recent years. As a 6'10 big, he's been a dynamic offensive player, scoring well inside, on face-ups, and as a legit driver. As a passer, he's also shown the potential to operate as a hub or other unique big wing creator, but defensively there are still a lot of questions. He doesn't shoot it yet, and it makes him someone that's been difficult to place within this class. His skill and feel is hard to keep out of this range, but there are still some things that could make him a tougher fit in the league, so those areas will be watched closely in Big Ten play. Ben Seraph has been a consistent producer for Ohm all year. He's a big guard playmaker who gets to his spots well. He's a versatile pick and roll passer and a capable defender. Now, his shot is still going to be vital to his success. He's been under 30% there. He's pretty left-hand dominant still, and the rim frequency hasn't been great, but he has still found a way to be productive as a young guard in a pro league. I do think he has moments as a driver that make me feel like there's more there for him to unlock, but yeah, productive young guard pro league. I think he'll stick in the top 20 mix because of it. Collin Murray Boyles is one of those prospects who has a lot to like, but also has flaws that are difficult to ignore, especially with the type of role he has for South Carolina this year. The lack of versatility on the perimeter and some bad decision making in traffic were apparent against Mississippi State and Bama, and they did a good job of taking him completely out of those games, but he did bounce back against Auburn. As a long-term prospect, his combination of defensive versatility, feel, and finishing make him a solid role player bet, but anything past that is too rich for me unless he shows more progression, given he's 6'7 and not like 6'10. But he's young, good players should be valued, and CMB is one of them. Thomas Sorber has continued his run as one of the most productive freshmen in December, and he remains a first-round prospect for me. He's got excellent upside offensively as a scorer inside. He's a talented playmaker and has at least taken threes pretty often. He's a bit undersized but has great positioning on defense and comes up with a healthy amount of blocks and steals. And even with some of those questions about him being undersized and how well he can hold up at the 5, he'll have plenty more tests coming up and time to show that he should stick in first-round conversations. It's not often you have a senior as good as Cam Jones that exceeds expectations, but that's exactly what he's done. He's taken big steps forward as a playmaker with more opportunity and has been a National Player of the Year contender in the process. He's older, but he's the type of guard that looks like he'll be able to play multiple roles and fit in different spots, so he's a clear first rounder for me at this point and is someone that could have some big moments down the stretch. Still just 19 years old, Noah Penda is one of the best and most versatile defenders in Pro A. He's taken big steps forward as a shooter and has the physical profile to belong in the NBA. I still question his shot some, and maybe more interestingly his ability to finish at the bucket, but it's hard not to see a potential contributor and someone worth considering in the first round. Noah Esinghe has continued to be one of the most productive teenagers I've seen at the EuroCup or German BBL adjacent levels recently. He just turned 18 in December and is averaging about 10 points and 5 rebounds in 20 minutes a game as a 6'9" forward. I guess my question is still the same in who exactly he is. He's an interesting defender, but he's not excellent anywhere. He's a good transition scorer, but he's a limited shooter, not really a plus playmaker, though I do like his feel in some short roll situations and making the extra pass. I worry he could fall into that Ousmane Dieng bucket of sort of jack of all trades who don't have a clear reason to be on the floor, but his production at this level makes him someone that's hard to not pay a lot of attention to. I don't think I've ever been more confused doing this than I am seeing the amount of boards and mocks that still have Jaeger Demon in the top 5. Now I'm going to start positive because I still think he's interesting. He's a big guard with excellent skill as a passer, maybe the best in the class. He's a good mover and has some shot making upside, so there is something there at 6'9". The issue is I don't think he's an NBA point guard. The handle and advantage creation just isn't there at all against better athletes. He's not great defensively and right now just not a good enough shot maker or shooter to make up for his issues. Now he could be an interesting playmaking wing type, but that low major dominance that he had to start the year just isn't something I think should be valued as much as it is right now. Now he's definitely got time to figure it out and has had some injuries, but I think there's too many questions to have him nearly that high. Jace Richardson has had some quieter games lately, but he's still found a way to be very productive in his minutes. He's been low usage, but the way that he's impacted the game doesn't happen often for a Michigan State freshman. Now, as good as he's been, I have wondered what his elite skill is and the role that he takes on in the league, given he's only 6'3". Others I've talked to or that you might see around have more faith in him scaling up or having more responsibility than I would, but nonetheless, he's still a very good player and decision maker and one that looks like he'll be able to carve out a role. Boogie Fland has a lot of intrigue as a point guard who's quick off the bounce, can make shots all over the floor and set the table for his teammates, and also has the tenacity that's necessary for small guards on defense. As much as I like him, he's shooting just 28% on 25 half-court rim attempts, which are both huge red flags. I still think there's a contributor there given how good he's been elsewhere, but for a small guard, that alone almost disqualifies him from joining that next tier conversations. But we'll see what he does the rest of the year given there's a little more upside given how quick he is. Now I'm sure you probably thought I forgot about him at this point, but this is where Nolan Traore comes in on the board. He remains an interesting playmaking prospect, but his struggles as a shooter, decision maker, and finisher have been glaring, and when he's also not a plus defender or someone that plays well without the ball, the appeal is just a lot harder to see. He is playing some good competition and that should be factored in, but unless he shows significant improvements, I don't think that I'll really consider him heavily inside of the lottery. The buzz for Miles Byrd has only continued to grow as of late. He's a 6'6" wing who's an active defender and good athlete who can also make plays for others and has been a much improved shot maker. The Mountain West isn't great competition, but his skill set is bound to intrigue a lot of teams as a plug and play guy, and he's in my first round for the time being. Danny Wolf is one of the most fun prospects in the class by a pretty wide margin. He's a legit 7-footer who has an excellent handle, he can pass it with the best of them and space the floor, and is also a smart defender as well. I see a ton of roles that he could play at the next level, and if the shot is at least passable, there's a legit impact guy there. He's a first rounder for me, and putting up 21, 13, 7, and 6 against USC is the perfect game to see the type of skill set that he has. I don't think we're going to learn much more about Nick Clifford at this point. He slumped a little from 3 in December, but overall his game as a 6'6" physical wing who is an improved playmaker and excellent rebounder is hard not to like. So for teams looking for early contributors in the 20s and 30s, Nick will have to be towards the top of their list. Hugo Gonzalez has continued to play limited minutes for Real Madrid, but a 14-point game against Rio where he hit 2 threes and played 25 minutes was enough to keep me intrigued. Now it was a blowout, but his upside as a slashing wing who can defend and has had upside as a shot maker in the past will keep him in the mix. Workouts will certainly play a big role in where exactly he ends up for teams, given he'll have as little recent film as anyone in the class, but contextually playing at this level and having this experience will be factored in. Alex Karaban might be the most boring prospect we'll talk about, but I actually mean that positively. He's been a model of consistency and clearly looks the part as an NBA contributor. As a complimentary wing piece who shoots, passes, and has improved defensively over his career. If I'm speaking solely from UConn's perspective, I wish he was a more aggressive creator, but overall, I like what he brings to the table. Rasheer Fleming has only continued to grow his NBA profile as an athletic forward who has grown immensely as a three-point shooter and scorer and can also play multiple positions on defense. He's put up about 19, 9, 2, and 1 on 70% true shooting in the last 7 games, and though there's still some questions about him as a passer and in his overall polish, I like him as a potential first-round pick. It's interesting that Dink Pate has both shot the ball significantly better than last year and has made an adjustment to an off-ball role, but it's resulted in seemingly more skepticism. Now he's still rough at the rim, probably doesn't do enough to warrant point guard duties, but a shot-making wing who can make a play and is solid on defense, that's something I still think is worth considering in the first round, especially for an 18-year-old working through things in the G League. Ian Jackson has been on fire as a scorer as of late, going for 20 plus in several straight games and doing it in numerous ways. He's still got some of the same question marks he had in high school as a guy who wavers as a decision maker and doesn't offer much as a passer, but I think he's draftable as a microwave type that's probably a better defensive prospect than he's gotten credit or the advanced numbers would show. Janai Broome will miss about a month with an ankle injury he suffered against South Carolina, which sucks, but he still profiles really well as a backup big and a potential first-round pick. He's productive inside, he's got great positioning on both ends, he's a good passer and has extended his game, and overall he's been as productive over his career as basically anyone I've seen. I'm skeptical of his game translating in the same way against NBA length and physicality, so I can't really get past him being more than a rotation bet, but he's a very solid prospect that has a good chance of contributing. Bogoljub Markovic has shown even more of his skill set as of late, ending the year off strong for Mega, and his appeal is fairly straightforward as a 6'11 guy who can handle and move extremely well for his size. He can shoot the 3 and scores fairly well on the interior. Now there's more questions on the defensive end and in him physically, but he's definitely got a game that's going to interest teams. Ryan Kalkbrenner continues to be a potential rotation big as a rim protector and play finisher at the bucket. He's big, he's a decent mover, and even though he's older and hasn't changed much these last 3 years or so, he's worth valuing and should have interest from the late first into about the 40s. Despite starting many of these games, Sergio De La Rey hasn't had a ton of playing time for Valencia as of late, but he has had his moments throughout the season, and a 6'6 guard with his level of shooting, playmaking, and defense is worth considering as a long-term bet. He's another guy playing top competition, so we probably won't see high usage or anything like that, but the skill set is certainly there against pros. I'm holding on to hope for Drake Powell for a little longer because I just think the wing defense can be that good. He's had some better games recently. He went for 14 at Louisville. He has 17 and 4 threes against SMU, but he is still a work in progress offensively, so we'll see how he looks the rest of the way and whether or not he is a 2-year guy. As good and important Edu Thiero has been for Arkansas, I can't quite get there with like top 20 talk because the shot and control is still behind. I love his energy, the slashing, the plays he's made, and the defensive versatility on the wing, but in order to play the type of role I think he will in the NBA, the shot is still vital, but he's a very interesting prospect and athlete otherwise. Will Riley hasn't been much of a factor recently, and his minutes have waned for Illinois. I still think there's an interesting prospect in a big wing shooter who can put it on the floor and make a play. Physically, I think another year makes sense rather than starting his NBA clock a little early, but we'll see how he performs these next several weeks. Alex Tui has had an important resurgence after a couple months of quiet play in the NBL, and I think he's a definite top 40 candidate. The shot has been the swing skill for him, and he's still only at about 30% there, but the wing size, team defense, and slashing is interesting enough to consider in the second, maybe even slightly higher. Carter Bryant is one of those prospects where you can just see it despite his limited minutes. Like we said last time, it might end up making sense for him to just take an extra year in college, but there's no reason that on this Arizona team he's playing as little as he does. He's big, he can defend, he plays well off the ball, he can shoot it. He's got clear NBA role player upside, and I think NBA teams are going to value him a little more than it seems his college situation does right now. Texas Tech's Darion Williams checks a lot of boxes as a potential NBA contributor. He's a big-bodied wing at about 6'6". He's a very good passer and playmaker. He's a decent shooter, and though he's not a great athlete, he is positionally good on defense. So even with his reliance on bully ball right now, that combination of skills he has intrigues me as a potential second-round pick. JoJo Tugler has been one of the most impactful defensive players I've ever seen in college, and I really don't think that's hyperbole. He's a great athlete, he's versatile, and on top of that, a block percentage of 17 as a 6'8" dude with a 7'6" wingspan. That's always going to jump off the page. Now offensively, he's an undersized center. There's some huge questions about where exactly he plays, but he's already the type of player I think is worth considering in the second round. Stanford's Maxime Reynaud has continued to be one of the best upperclassmen in college basketball, putting up about 20 and 12 and hitting nearly 2 threes a game. He's got great polish in the post, he can pass it, he can handle it a little, and he's looked improved on the defensive end from the games that I've seen to this point. There's still some questions on that end, but his skill set is absolutely draftable. I've had a chance to catch up on Johan Grunlow's play in the German BBL, and I've been intrigued. At about 6'11", he's a big-time shot blocker who has the upside to space the floor and is a solid mover. I still think there's some physicality questions there, and he could use some polish in the pick and roll, but he's got a compelling skill set for a big. Rocco Zakarski has dealt with some injuries and hasn't played much since his good stretch over a month ago, and it makes him a prospect that is pretty difficult to track, and who knows what he'll ultimately decide. But if he does declare, he's interesting enough as a 7'2" big with solid movement, rim protection, and play finishing upside. Without that bigger body of work, he's not someone who I would be particularly high on, but he could be worth the risk if teams are confident in his health and that he's more capable than his minutes would suggest. UAB's Yaxel Lendeborg has continued to be one of the more well-rounded players in college basketball. He's a great defender, he can pass it, he can score in a couple ways, and he's a good athlete at 6'9". The shot is still a work in progress, so that's going to be huge for him, especially as an older player, but he has an NBA profile for sure.
Basketball. After missing his first four.
Tennessee's Chaz Lanier is a pretty obvious draftable prospect even as an older guy. He's in the middle of an all-time shooting season at over 45% on nearly 9 attempts a game, and he did similar things last year at North Florida. He can shoot a pull-up, he's physical, he's solid on defense. I see someone that can play a role and has an elite skill, and that's enough to have well in the mix. Cannon Ketching's combination of size, shooting, and defense on the wing is going to keep him an appealing NBA prospect. He's going to need to be more consistent and is probably more of a borderline stay or go prospect right now. I'd imagine playing with AJ DeBansa would be fairly intriguing, but you can see the type of role and impact that Ketchings could eventually have in the NBA. JC Toppin had a minor knee injury that kept him out for most of December, but he returned and put up 26, 10, and 4 against UCF and made his presence felt in a blowout win against Utah. He's an energy forward who's versatile on defense and extremely productive on the interior. Those same questions are there in him being a tweener and needing to show some of the upside he did as a shooter in the combine, but he's another guy who's at least draftable this year. If we're talking go-getters and guys who just go out there and produce, Florida's Walter Clayton Jr. is your guy. He's been absolutely dominant in some of these games for them, just dismantling as a shot maker and playmaker, and the improvements that he's made on that front make him a real rotation bet. It's not often you see a guy go from Iona to lighting up the SEC in a couple years' time, but that's what Clayton has done, and he deserves to be valued for it. Jameer Watkins has had some of the funniest stat lines I've seen a wing have, shooting over 17 free throws in 3 different games this year and just putting a lot of pressure on teams as a slasher. He's been mostly the same guy that I liked a year ago with more responsibility offensively. I wished he'd made a bit more noticeable shooting improvement given he'll be 24 as a rookie, but he's a solid second round pick at this point. Tyrese Proctor has been a vital piece to this Duke team and so much more consistent, though in a lot different role than he's played in the past. He's been knocked down from 3, I've liked him defensively on the perimeter, and he's made a play when necessary. The big test for him will come late into February and in March when those lights get brighter and he's going to have to respond, but he checks all the boxes for a complimentary guard, so he's definitely draftable. Andre Stojakovic has put himself in the draft mix as of late. He's been a revelation for Cal this season, putting up nearly 20 points a game and scoring well as a driver and knocking down a couple threes as a 6'7" wing. I definitely want to see him defensively the rest of the way, but overall he's been really good in year 2 and has a projectable skill set. And for those wondering, yes, this is Paige's son. Northwestern senior Brooks Barnhizer has had a big-time breakout and recently had a stretch in December and January where he averaged 20 points, 11 rebounds, 5 assists, 3 steals, and 2 blocks a game. He's a 6'6" wing that defends, plays with a lot of toughness, and has initiated a lot for this team. I'm not sure what caliber of prospect he is yet, but he definitely belongs here and will only grow his appeal if he shows a little more as a shooter. After a rougher start to the season, Hunter Salas looks like he's getting back on track. He's gone for 20 plus in each of the last 4. The shot has been back and it's been closer to the guy that we saw last year. He's got a little different role this year, but shot making 2 guard who can defend, though a bit undersized, should still have appeal in the second round. I still like St. John's RJ Lewis quite a bit. His energy, athleticism, and perimeter defense lead the way along with his production as a scorer. The shot is going to have a lot to do with his potential NBA success, and that has gone the opposite direction from a hotter start, and he also hasn't even taken them in some games, but there's enough else there in his game to at least consider him at this point. Ben Henshaw had some standout moments his first year in the NBL a year ago and has built on them in year 2. He's a 6'5" off guard who can shoot the 3, make a play, and is a pretty good athlete. He's gotten into a lot of foul trouble and struggled as a finisher, but I think he's grown into a guy really worth considering. Michael Ruzic is still out with a thumb injury, but he's got some appeal as a stretch forward who can make a play and move fairly well. I haven't been the biggest fan of his game, but he's frequently ranked much higher than this, so he's definitely a name to follow. Princeton's Xavier Lee remains one of the most creative ball handlers and playmakers in the country. He put up 21 points and 11 dimes in a big win against Rutgers, and his craft and space creation were on full display in that one. I wish he was a bit better at the rim and off the ball as a shooter, but I still think he's got enough to warrant consideration. Mark Sears has looked a lot more like the guy we saw last year recently. He's small and has defensive questions, but he's a big-time shot maker and playmaker that's deserving of second-round interest and will only boost his stock for those big-time decision makers if he leads Bama late into the tourney again. And here's a look back at the entire top 60. Now there's still quite a few players I like from this group that we didn't talk about in detail, one of them being Washington State's Cedric Coward, who is now out for the year and had to have shoulder surgery, but he probably would have ended up around top 40 for me, so we'll see what he ends up deciding. Villanova's Eric Dixon has been so productive this year that it's undeniable, even as old and unorthodox as his game is. The Avisis twins are still interesting. Eric Daly has made a significant jump this year, and then you've got guys like Keyshawn Gilbert, Anthony Robinson, Alex Condon, Tucker DeFree, Sion James, and then the freshmen in green I think are probably multi-year guys, but have stood out for different reasons. I also like the talent in this international group. Still got some catching up to do with many of them, but from Neoklas Abdallahs, Ethan Amansa, Mario St. Supri, and others, they've been intriguing from what I have seen lately. I appreciate y'all for watching this video. We'll probably do a few more first looks before we move on to some other stuff, get the pod going, and probably do a rookie watch update at the mid-season point here soon. So stay tuned for all that. And also be sure to follow me on Twitter, because that's where I will post the most frequently about, things all draft and NBA related. So definitely be sure to go over there. Unless you're a Chiefs hater, apologize in advance, it's playoff time. I might get a little annoying, but yeah, that's all I've got for this one. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to leave a like, subscribe if you are new to the channel, and leave a comment down below of what you think of this class as a whole, and also some guys you think could crash the lottery the rest of the way. As always, I'm Keandre, this is HoopIntellect. Until next time, I'm out.